The Spider-Man 2099 situation is actually insane right now. It's only been a couple of days and the community is already at each other's throat over whether Miguel O'Hara is a skin or a full character. Half the community thinks he's just a skin and the better half thinks he's getting his own slot. No bias, of course. Okay, to be fair, I can kinda see why both sides think they're right. And the funny thing is, this entire debate started because of this single image. I'm Ray, and today we're gonna figure out why the Spider-Man 2099 debate is actually more important than most people think. Now, if you have spent more than 5 minutes on Rivals Twitter this week, which, if you have, my condolences, you've probably seen people arguing over whether Miguel O'Hara is a skin or a future character. And after watching this debate spiral completely out of control, I think one side has way more sauce than the other. So, let's quickly talk about how this whole thing started. A few days ago, Marvel Rivals released this Alchemax map, and it was filled with a ton of references to, you guessed it, Miguel O'Hara. From being mentioned in the official map description, all the way to a wanted poster that basically became the center of this entire debate. Naturally, Rivals Twitter saw all of this and immediately found its next thing to argue about. Within a few hours, people had already chosen their sides and they were ready to die for it. Some players pointed out that the devs appeared to be reusing Spider-Man assets to tease Miguel, and that immediately meant, yes, he's being set up as a skin. Okay, now part of that comes from older Spider-Man 2099 references, which even I'll admit, felt a lot more like skin teases than character teases. But if you spend enough time reading through the arguments, you start to realizing something. For a lot of people, this isn't really about whether Miguel can be a character. It's about whether they want him to be one. Because every time Spider-Man 2099 gets brought up, someone inevitably asks, what about Green Goblin? What about Mysterio? But what about Dr. Octopus? As if we have some limited number of character slots, and Miguel showing up now means Green Goblin is getting boxed out of the game forever. Like, come on. Others would rather see Marvel Rivals explore groups like Midnight Suns, Thunderbolts, or more of Marvel villains before adding another Spider person to the roster. And look, I understand where that comes from. But I think a lot of people have convinced themselves that Spider people are somehow taking over the roster, when that just isn't true. Oh, and by Spider people, I mean the actual Spider-Man variants. Peter, Miles, Miguel, characters like that. Out of 51 known characters currently in Marvel Rivals, only 3 are Spider people, and one of them is Venom, who's closer to Spider-Man villains than the Spider people. So, the idea that Miguel showing up somehow means every game is going to be filled with too many Spider people feels a little dramatic. And that's the main problem. None of those arguments actually answer the question of whether Miguel should be a skin or a character. Because once you stop looking at who people want added and start looking at Miguel himself, that's where the skin argument starts falling apart. Because Miguel isn't just another version of Peter Parker. In fact, one of the things that made Spider-Man 2099 stand out in the first place is that he wasn't Peter at all. He is Miguel O'Hara, his own character, his own story, his own world. And that's important because when people hear the word variant, they immediately picture different versions of the same person. But Miguel isn't really a Peter Parker variant, he's a Spider-Man variant. There's a difference. Now, sure, both characters got bitten by the whole Spider-Man destiny thing. Every Spider-Man story has a few similarities. They are called canon events for a reason. Yeah, I had to make a Spider-Verse reference. It's legally required. But if origin stories were the only thing separating characters, I'd actually understand the skin argument a lot more. The problem is, that's not where the differences stop, because Miguel doesn't even have the same powers as Peter. A lot of people don't realize this, but Miguel straight up doesn't have spider sense, which is kind of a big deal, considering that's one of the most iconic Spider-Man abilities ever. It's also Spider-Man's passive in the game. Instead, Miguel has completely different abilities, a different fighting style, different strengths, different weaknesses, and honestly plays a lot like his own separate character than a variation of Peter. And that's exactly why I think comparing him to a skin doesn't really work. Because if Miles Morales gets to be his own character, because he's completely different from Peter of course, then Miguel should be held to the exact same standard. And that brings us to this image right here. Because Marvel Rivals has already told us where they stand on this. The devs have repeatedly said that if a character differs too much from the original, they won't turn them into a skin. And this wasn't some random statement either. They talked about it before launch, they talked about it in community discussions, they have been surprisingly consistent about it ever since. In fact, there was even an AMA on the Rivals Discord before even the release of Rivals, where people asked this exact question, and the answer was basically the same. Characters that are too different become characters, not skins. Funnily enough, I actually recorded that entire AMA back before launch, and it's still on the channel. Looking back now, it's kinda interesting seeing how many of those early answers ended up shaping the game we have today. Which means if we are judging Miguel by the standards the developers themselves have already laid out, the character argument starts looking a lot stronger than the skin argument. But of course, at the end of the day, Marvel Rivals is a game. And honestly, the biggest reason I think Miguel ends up as a character is way simpler than lore, popularity and any of that. It's gameplay. Because Marvel Rivals doesn't really build characters around comic accuracy. I mean, look at Ro, they gave her all the Chronovian powers. It builds them around whether the characters can bring something unique to the roster. And when you start looking at Miguel through that lens, the character argument starts making even more sense. Now, if you've watched Across the Spider-Verse, you've probably noticed Miguel doesn't actually fight like Peter at all. He's way more aggressive, he uses his claws constantly, he relies on his brute force, he's diving onto people, pinning them down, and generally making Miles' day significantly worse. Even his web talons, those giant orange energy things he uses throughout the movie, already gives the devs way more design space than people realize. Instead of another character focused completely on web swinging and uppercutting, going in and out, he would be a lot more dangerous close range. He would be able to lock down people, have mobility with grabs, crowd control, and honestly a dozen other things. And that's before we even get into things like his vampiric spider abilities, which could easily become their own mechanic. I won't go too deep into the kit concept because otherwise this video suddenly turns into Ray accidentally designed Spider-Man 2099 for 10 minutes straight. But the point is simple. The more you actually look at Miguel's powers, the easier it becomes to imagine a completely unique Rivals character. And the more I think about it, the more I kinda want to play that character myself, okay? I can't hide it, okay? I am a big fan of Miguel O'Hara. Like, of course, a character with a completely different personality and lore, a completely different power set and fighting style, one of the most popular spider people Marvel has ever created, one of the main characters of the highest grossing animated movies ever made, and we're looking at that guy and going, yeah, that's probably a skin. Like, come on, guys, are you even listening to yourself? But regardless of whether I am right or completely wrong, I don't think we're going to be waiting very long for the answer. And could I be wrong? Absolutely. Would that stop me from making another one of these videos the next time Rivals gives us a new variant to argue about? Ho ho ho, no. So let me know what you think down below, skin or character? Because after spending way too much time researching this entire debate, if I had to put my money on one side, Miguel O'Hara isn't coming to Marvel Rivals as a skin. He's coming as a character. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.